We are live.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to our monthly planning committee meeting, and we have a number of matters on the agenda today, including two public hearings. So first of all, Mr. Clerk, have you taken the roll call?
Through the chair, roll call has been taken.
And it looks like we have full attendance today. So members, does anybody have a declaration of pecuniary interest they need to make regarding any item on today's agenda? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands. So separation, we do have the following items that will be automatically separated. Item 6.1.1, which is the bylaw amendment PZ 18 draft plan of condominium for 58 Morel Street, because there are delegations. So is there any other item other than, of course, the Planning Act matters that anyone wants separated, excuse me, for discussion purposes? Not seeing any raised hands. I am going to request that item 6.1.2, safe housing supply, that be separated. Okay. I'll get a mover and seconder then for the items that are not being separated for discussion purposes. Moved by Councillor McCreary, seconded by Councillor Sluss. And Councillor McCreary, if you please read the motion. On the screen there for you.
Yes, sorry about that, Mayor. That's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Sluss, that the items not separated be approved.
All right, Mr. Clerk, could you please read the title of the items that we're voting on?
Through the chair, the following items are subject to the vote. Item 6.1.3, West Brant Heights Phase 1 subdivision traffic and parking control. Item 6.1.4, 6211 minutes planning committee from the May 11th meeting, and 622 Colborne Street West Road reserve dedication bylaw. Councillor Sluss, we're just waiting for your vote. All items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 6-0. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sluss, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so move into the statutory public hearing portion of today's meeting. And we have two public meetings on today's agenda, and public meetings are held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of each hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the applicant, planning staff, and the public, either in support of or against the application. At the end of each public meeting, of which again there are two today, the committee will then consider a recommendation, which is then generally considered for a final decision at the next meeting of council, which typically is the last Tuesday of each month. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone who wants notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. We ask that members of the public in attendance today that who speak to any item to please ensure that you add your contact information to the sign-in sheet that's located at the delegates table. The procedure we follow is that the applicant speaks first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. Each will have up to 10 minutes to speak, including any questions that may come from the committee members. The applicant at the end will then have up to 5 minutes to provide clarification to any questions or issues raised during the meeting. So we'll now move on to consider the first item, which is zoning bylaw amendment PZ 0322, draft plan of subdivision 29T22503 in relation to a property municipally described as 313 Conklin Road. So I'll now ask the applicant or the agent who's appearing before the committee, if you please come forward. And again, please state your name. A reminder, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation inclusive of questions.
Good morning. My name is Diana Morris. I'm Senior Planner at T. Johns Consulting Group. So good morning, Chair, members of committee, staff, and the public. Again, my name is Diana Morris, Senior Planner at T. Johns Consulting Group, agent on behalf of the owner for lands located at 313 Conklin Road in Brantford. And with me is Jason Mosdell of Live Communities. I am pleased to be before you this morning to discuss the proposed development and associated applications for zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for the subject lands. I would like to thank Mr. House and planning staff for their work on this file and for bringing the applications forward to committee for approval. The proposed development is located on the west side of Conklin Road, south of Powell Road, and north of Mount Pleasant Road. The total site area is 1.92 hectares or 4.74 acres with 96 meters of frontage on Conklin Road. The surrounding community includes a mix of residential and institutional uses, including single detached dwellings to the north and south, townhouse dwellings, a Catholic and public elementary schools to the north, single detached dwellings and a landscaping business to the east, and residential agricultural lands to the south. The LE&N Trail is located directly west of the proposed development. The proposed development consists of 89 townhouses, which is broken down into 45 townhouses, 10 dual fronting townhomes, and 34 back-to-back townhouses with access from Conklin Road. Please note that no individual residential driveways to Conklin Road are proposed. Access to these units will be from the internal private condominium roadway. The density is approximately 47.6 units per hectare after the 5-meter road winding from Conklin Road has been accounted for. There will be a total of 223 parking spaces on site, which includes 178 residential parking spaces, 45 visitor parking spaces with 4 accessible parking spaces allocated. Sidewalks are provided throughout the common element roadway, and an approximate 837 square meter common amenity area for resident enjoyment is proposed to the north of the block. And access to the LE&N Trail is proposed north of the subject lands. The subject lands are designated neighborhood residential, greenfield area, and neighborhood corridor in the City of Brantford official plan. The proposed townhouses are permitted within these designations, and the units will be a maximum of 3 stories in height. The existing zoning is suburban residential, SR, and agricultural A zone in the County of Brant zoning bylaw. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment before you this morning is to rezone to a site-specific residential multiple low-density RM1 zone. As noted in the staff report, these lands are currently in the County of Brant zoning bylaw and continue to be until the City of Brantford prepares and finalizes its new zoning bylaw. In consultation with city staff, the RM1 zone is being requested as it is comparable to the city's base zoning for medium-density residential uses. The following site-specific amendments are being requested. The minimum street setback requested is 3.5 meters and is supported by staff as the reduction is considered appropriate as the dwellings will not create backlotting on Conklin Road. The minimum rear yard proposed is 3.5 meters, which only applies to the southwesternmost unit where the setback is functionally a side yard and is supported by staff as all other rear yards will meet the minimum required of 7.5 meters. A minimum 9 square meters per unit of amenity space has been included as a site-specific regulation to guarantee that common amenity space is provided for the block. Lastly, the parking size regulations are being proposed at 2.75 meters by 5.5 meters as it aligns with the City of Brantford zoning bylaw. Concurrent applications have been submitted include a draft plan and condominium and site plan and are currently being reviewed by city staff and external agencies in compliance with the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision before you. The following slides illustrate the proposed elevations. Again, these will further be elaborated on throughout the site plan approval process. These are the street townhouses, which are proposed within the external limits of the block. These are the dual fronting townhomes, which are proposed along Conklin Road. And these are the back-to-back townhouses proposed internal to the development block. The studies outlined on the screen are the supporting documents submitted with the formal applications. As a quick summary, the functional servicing report demonstrated that proposed development can be serviced by extension of existing or planned services. Transportation impact study confirmed that current intersections are operating within acceptable levels of service, and the proposed is not anticipated to affect the current or forecasted levels of service. Noise study conducted that stationary noise and sources of vibration are not anticipated. A stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessments were completed and submitted to the ministry. No resources were found and no further assessments are required. A tree survey and natural heritage assessment was completed and did not identify any significant natural heritage features or species at risk on site. Concerns were raised by 6 nations of the Grand River regarding tree loss. A scoped EIS in response to concerns was completed, and with discussions between the owners and the 6 nations, an agreement was reached with 6 nations to a tree replacement ratio of 10:1. Geotechnical report concluded that the proposed construction will have little or no effect on the local groundwater conditions. An urban design brief was completed for the development, outlining the urban design principles, which will be further reviewed throughout the site plan approval process. As stated in the staff report, previous comments and concerns by staff, external agencies, and the public have been addressed and are satisfied with supporting the proposed development and associated zoning bylaw amendment. Respectfully, we request approval of the proposed zoning bylaw and draft plan of subdivision before you. I'm in agreement with staff that the proposed development is consistent with provincial policies, official plan, and will contribute to the city's housing supply and provide housing options to meet diverse housing needs. The development supports intensification of an underutilized site and will contribute to complete community in the settlement area. Thank you very much for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. We'll see if there are any questions. Councillor Sikoli.
I'm over here. Sorry. Hi.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Morning.
I was at the neighborhood meeting where we gave a presentation, and some of the feedback and the discussion really centered around the trails that this development will back onto, and that on Powell Road, basically the trail is right up against Powell Road, and there were a lot of concerns that individuals would park on Powell and then create these paths through the trail to access the development as overflow parking. And I'm not sure if you've been there, but I do walk that trail daily. So that little piece of trail that sort of is right on Powell Road, it's in its infancy stage. It's really young. The foliage is very susceptible to damage. And we've seen some people have already started creating those little pathways. This is my roundabout way of saying that during the neighborhood meeting, there were a lot of promises made by the representative of LIV that we were going to look at putting a fence or something of that nature along Powell to discourage individuals from creating these man-made paths. And I don't necessarily see that reflected on here, and realizing that as a city, we can't
Councillor
enforce.
Sikoli, do you have a question? You're getting to a question.
Am I missing something, or is that plan reflected here in the draft plan, or do you offer any other proposed solutions for them?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Yes, the owners are aware of the concerns that were heard. I was not part of that neighborhood meeting, but I have looked at the feedback that the public had. And speaking to the owners, they are more than willing to hear the concerns and do what they can to address those concerns. Again, we do still need to go through a formal site plan process, which will outline those specific details. So the concept plan that was submitted was just to show kind of how the zoning bylaw amendment and the units align should this zoning be approved. So come time at the site plan process, the owners are more than willing to look at that option with the fencing. But again, it does depend on the existing infrastructure and obviously their goal is to retain as many trees as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Thank you for your presentation. So is the current plan to eliminate all the trees that are along the north boundary with the multi-use trail?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, no, the goal is to retain as much as they can. Again, we will have to submit another formal landscape plan to show exactly what trees are to be removed and what trees will be retained and how we're compensating for those trees. So considering these concerns, those will definitely be looked at. Those
So
trees
when you say as much as we can, does that mean that?
So just a second, Councillor McCurry, we've hit 10 minutes. So I'm going to propose that we extend the time period by 5 minutes to allow for questions from the committee members. If anybody's opposed to that, I guess I'll need a motion. So if I don't see anybody opposed, not anybody opposed, we'll go another 5 minutes. Go ahead. Councillor McCurry.
I'm trying to recover my train of thought. Just kidding. So when you say as much as we can, I believe that was your word. When you say that, do you mean your plan will not permit that, or do you mean that you're going to try like the Dickens to do that? Which case is it?
Sorry, through Chair, just sorry for the confusion. Our goal is to retain as many trees as possible. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's different.
Sorry, the wording, sorry, apologize.
Yeah, it's all in the definitions and the wordings.
Right.
Now, at the meeting, I believe there were some concerns expressed that there wasn't enough parking. So you get two parking spaces per unit, plus another 40 or 50?
45 visitor parking spaces.
So have you increased that since the public meeting? Or does it remain the same?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, we have. The number of units have also decreased. So we do meet the parking requirements of the bylaw. This is where there's difference between County of Brant's bylaw and Brantford. Brant requires 1 space per unit and Brantford requires 2. So we have actually, we've provided the required parking spaces per the bylaw.
And you're going to have 1 public access from the development onto the trail. Is that what I read into it?
Correct. There will be a trail connection. Yes.
How are you going to keep folks from simply wearing paths?
From
From wearing desire paths through there? Just because you make an access point doesn't mean they're going to walk on it. So how do you armor the rest of the boundary to keep folks from wearing out what's in between?
Okay, through you, Chair, to the councillor, there will be, sorry if I understand your question correctly.
That may have been a bit of a convoluted expression. Sorry, go ahead.
So the trail connection, obviously we're hoping residents will use it to connect to the trail. I know that there was concerns maybe of ATVs or anything accessing that trail. So the owners are willing to, maybe have bollards there to make sure that, access like ATVs and unauthorized vehicles don't access that pathway.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Garbage collection. Is garbage collection off-site then? There's going to be a garbage truck and blue box truck go directly into the site?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. I believe it will be private collection, but that will be clarified once we go through the site plan process and draft plan of condo.
So I don't see any place here for garbage bins or Molochs.
Yeah, so through the Chair to the councillor, it is not currently shown on the site, on the conceptual plan. Come through the site plan approval process, that's when that will specifically be dealt with. And if there is spaces where we need to allocate that will be shown in the site plan through the detailed design.
You are aware that the garbage collection can come on site because there's no backing up required here, right?
Through you, Chair, yes.
Okay, your access points to the L&E and trail, your drawing shows 2 access points. It looks like, yeah. Now, what's going to prevent people from outside that condominium corporation from entering the property? And what's going to prevent condominium corporation from fencing off that access?
Through you, Chair, to the counselor, that's definitely not something that we would want. We wouldn't want them to cut that off. So again, hearing your concerns, we'll definitely elaborate that more at the site plan process.
I raised them because I have a condominium corporation in Ward 4 where they had to close the fence to a neighborhood park because people in the park were taking a shortcut through the condominium development.
Okay.
Which could happen here.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's enough for now.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Did I hear you correctly to that you're going to replace trees at a 10-to-1 ratio?
Through the chair to the counselor, yes, that is correct.
And what was the current ratio before that recommendation from Six Nations of the Grand River?
Through the chair, I believe it was 2-to-1 in that regard.
3-to-1.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be asking for more in the future. If it's that easy that you can just ask for 10-to-1 and get it, get on them. How many trees are on site?
154.
But at this time, you don't know how many you would have to cut down, from what I heard,
Through
correct?
the chair to the counselor, I believe we did have a preliminary landscape plan that was done, and through that it was 151 trees with 80 new trees to be replaced. To compensate for those, but per discussions with Six Nations, for 10-to-1 ratio, because the owners did meet with them to discuss their concerns regarding the tree removal. So come time at the site plan when we do the detailed landscape design is when those numbers could.
So how many trees are you at right now then for what's projected to be planted?
Right now, what we had provided was 80 new trees.
With the 10-to-1 ratio?
No, through the chair, no, not yet.
So are we talking 810 trees?
I guess that through the chair, sorry, that is something that we'll have to look at again to know the specific number with that ratio.
Well, if you've got 81 now,
Mhm.
it would sound like you're going to be close to
would-
800
it
trees.
Through the chair, yeah, that's the ratio, yeah.
Okay, I kind of like that.
All right, we've gone another 5 minutes. I see Councillor Celeste would like to ask some questions. I would as well. So unless there's any objections, I'll add another 5 minutes. So go ahead, Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. The trees that are being supplied to replace those cut down, I want to confirm they will be native trees, native species, correct?
Through the chair to the counselor, yes, that is correct.
Fine, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Ms. Morris, I got a couple of questions. One, in terms of the 2 spaces per unit, parking spaces per unit, is that achieved through what? The garage is 1 and the driveway is 1?
Yes, that is correct. Chair.
Okay. And how many units were proposed originally? Because I saw in the material that perhaps the number of units were reduced by half, but it wasn't clear to me when that happened or how much was originally proposed and how much it was scaled back based on public input.
Sorry, yes, through you, Chair. The T. John's was retained in January 2023. So I know that there was a previous plan, and per the neighborhood meeting, the number of units were increased. If I can recall correctly, I believe there was about 95 units proposed, which just went down to 89.
Great. Thanks. I don't think we have any other questions. So thank you very much, Ms. Morris. And we will, once we've heard from staff and the public, have you come back for 5 further minutes of clarification.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so we'll now move on to planning staff. And we're not required to hear from planning staff. It's not mandatory under our new procedural bylaw. If anybody does want to hear from planning staff, just raise your hand and we'll have, all right. Councilor Carpenter's asked, so yes. So Sean, you're going to come forward, please. This is Sean House, one of our planners. You know the procedure, Sean.
Good morning, Planning Committee. My name is Sean House. I'm a planner here at the city. I did prepare a presentation, the content of which was largely covered by the applicant. I can zip through it though if you would like. I would just need someone to pull my presentation up on screen, please. Thank you. We've received an application to amend the zoning bylaw at 313 Conklin Road for 89 townhouses. And there's also a plan of subdivision which will facilitate a future condominium and relief from part lot control application. The lands are on the west side of Conklin Road, north of Mount Pleasant Road, have an area of 2 hectares or 5 acres with 96 meters of frontage along Conklin. There's currently a single detached dwelling on the property, and the lands are surrounded by single detached dwellings and the rail trail to the north, and a combination of agricultural uses and single detached dwellings in all other directions. Here's a photo of the frontage of the property along Conklin Road. This is the frontage along the rail trail. And here is the single detached dwelling that currently exists on the property. As I'd mentioned, we have 89 townhouse units proposed, 1 access off of Conklin Road, and the units will be accessed internally, 223 parking spaces, and an approximately 850 square meter central amenity area for the future residents, with a children's play area, as well as a trail access. And during the previous presentation, there was a question about 2 trail accesses versus 1. The 2 was originally proposed, but it's being revised to 1. Just an elevation of the front of the townhouses. As you can see, it's 3 stories. This would be internally facing. And here's a rear elevation of the townhouses. This is the plan of subdivision that's before us. It's just a single block as well as a road widening. And once registered, this is going to allow, if approved, it will allow the applicant to move forward with a condominium and relief from part lot control application. The subject lands are designated as residential as well as neighborhood corridor within our official plan. This permits the use. And the proposal does support the intensification of an underutilized site and does contribute to the housing supply in the city. And if approved, the development will conform to the official plan. As previously discussed, these lands were in Brant County, but annexed back in January 2017. Through the boundary expansion agreement, the lands continue to have the same zoning as that time until a new comprehensive zoning bylaw is in effect. So as such, the terminology does vary from the city's zoning bylaw 160-90, but the proposed residential zone will permit the townhouse development. There are slight reductions to the street setback, rear yard, and parking space width to facilitate the development, and staff are supportive of these minor adjustments. So as discussed, the lands do contain a large number of trees that will need to be removed to facilitate the development. As part of the review process, we required a tree inventory and natural heritage assessment and confirmed that the property does not contain any protected species or habitats for species at risk. And the applicant is to provide a substantial amount of replacement trees to be incorporated into the development as shown on this slide. The proposal is being designed to generally align with the city's urban design manual. And in our review, we noted the importance of, framing Conklin Road having those units address the public realm, so we're not ending up with a backlotting situation. And as I'd mentioned, the amenity area will contain a children's playground, which is highly encouraged. The traffic impact study was submitted in support of the application. It didn't forecast a negative impact to existing conditions. Our transportation reviewers were accepting of that, just noting that we will be investigating if a left turning lane into the site is necessary via the site plan process. Last but not least, a stage 1 and stage 2 archaeological assessment were completed with no resources found. Notice of this public meeting was issued to all property owners within a 120-meter radius. And we also held a neighborhood meeting in June of last year. Comments we heard from those attending the meeting related to parking, traffic, and environmental impacts of the proposed development. Staff have done a high-level calculation of the land that would be required were this to be developed as single detached units, making assumptions on what the smallest lot size the city permits for a single detached dwelling. And, you know, developing this as townhouses versus singles, we're saving about an acre of land, and that's not taking into account roads and other infrastructure that would be required for singles. So I'd like to conclude that these applications are consistent with the policies of the official plan, the provincial policy statement, and the growth plan. And based on these considerations, planning staff recommend that the applications are approved. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
We've got 3 minutes left. Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. A couple of questions. You know, when I look at the 10-to-1 tree planting ratio has been requested of 151 trees removed, that's 1,500 trees. Now, when I look at the actual geographical area on the map, Powell Road, it doesn't seem like there's any trees planted on that Powell Road side of the trail. There could be, but if they are, they're awful small. Is there an ability to use some of those tree planting that's required to fill that side full of trees, which would prevent an easy access to the trail? Other than there is an actual physical access to the trail that the city's provided there that's farther east of farther west of this property, so nowhere near the entrance that the property is putting would answer those questions about people accessing and parking on Powell Road. Could that be part of the site plan?
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor, from what I understand, the discussions and, you know, the determining the details of the tree replacement ratio are still ongoing. So I think those types of comments could definitely be taken into consideration.
We could look at planting them on that north side of the burn or east side of the burn. I see staff back there asking.
So through the chair to the councillor, Nicole Wilmot, Director of Planning and Development Services. I think you're absolutely right. So what we've heard from the applicant as well as Sean is that a full detailed landscape plan will be a component of the site plan approval process. That will look at exactly where those the replacement trees will be planted on site. It's those remaining trees that will then form that ratio of what will need to be replanted. So that number hasn't been finalized. And I do understand that there are ongoing conversations with Six Nations as well, but it's not until we determine what exactly can be replanted on site that we'll have that sort of number in terms of a replanting plan.
So there is a possibility of planting them on the city's property on the other side of the berm.
Absolutely. I think what is the key takeaway is that fulsome design will be done through the site plan approval process.
And that'll be in consultation with the Ward 1 councillors.
Yeah.
One final question, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Sean, you said the notice went out 120 meters. I always thought it was 180 meters. Did it change?
Through you, Chair, no, the Planning Act requires 120.
It's always been 120. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess back to the trees. What caliper of tree are we talking about with this 10-to-1 ratio? Like, are these whips or are they substantial trees?
Through you, Chair, I don't have that information handy right now. Something I can look into you and provide you with more detail with. I would defer a little bit to the applicant as well, but they do have a preliminary landscaping plan for the site, and I would expect the trees that are to be planted on site will be, a little more mature than, those that might be replaced off site.
Okay, and I'd just like to confirm, it's Six Nations that are demanding this, the 10-to-1 ratio. I'm presuming that the 10-to-1 ratio would be planted within the city boundary, not on Six Nation. Am I correct in my assumption?
Through you, Chair, I don't believe those details have been determined yet.
Okay. All right, and then just finally, if I could, Mr. Mayor, the traffic control, the traffic light that's at the intersection of Conklin and Mount Pleasant. It appears that it's a temporary thing, but I think it was just until the permanent installation could be done. Do we have a timeline on that?
Through the chair, Gary Peaver, Manager of Development Engineering. Currently, the Conklin and Mount Pleasant works that is proposed is in the early design stage with Public Works. We're expecting approximately about a 2-year construction window. So I would say within the next 3 to 4 years.
Maybe I'm confused, Mr. Peaver, but we're designing how to put a stoplight in?
Through the chair, back to you, Councillor. No, it also involves the water main and sanitary along Mount Pleasant. There is an ongoing project that Public Works is working on. And again, being in the early stages, they're still looking what needs to occur on the above grounds.
That makes a lot more sense. Thanks a lot, Gary. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, members, we've gone slightly beyond 10. We've got at least one other member that wants to ask questions of staff. So I'm going to, nope. Okay, so that's it. In terms of staff, thank you very much, Sean. So we'll now move to the public portion. Well, it's all public to begin with, but this is where members of the public can speak to this matter, either for and against. And if there are any members of the public who are attending the meeting virtually, you can ask to speak to the application by using the raised hand function at the bottom of the screen. But first, we'll ask, is there anyone here in council chambers who would like to speak to this application? If so, ask that you please come forward to the delegates table. Good morning. If you could please state your names and address, and then you'll have 10 minutes to speak to the matter.
You guys run the microphones?
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Jane Seguin. I am the owner of the property on 433 Mount Pleasant, which is the corner property on Mount Pleasant Road and Conklin Road. I am a lifelong resident there. I have lived there for over 65 years. I bought the property from my mother. My son currently lives there, and I maintain the property.
Sorry, if I can just interrupt for a minute. So who do you have with you?
No, I'm sorry. I'll let him introduce himself.
My name's Don Seguin and I'm her husband.
Good.
And I'm co-owner of the property.
That's what I thought. Just need to clarify that. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Sure, we haven't done this before, so. So I am opposed to the change in the zoning to a low density zone. And I have quite a few reasons for that. I understand that at some point in time, the properties will be developed, but I don't think the low density zone is the proper zoning at this point in time. The reasons I am opposed to this is, first and foremost, is the traffic on that piece of Conklin Road. I know they are probably going to plan. It sounds like there's a 2-year plan to do something about that. But currently, Conklin Road has been widened by the property developers, I believe, that did all the development on the other end of the road, but now there's just this little piece of Conklin Road that's left that has never really been touched. They recently put traffic lights in there, and it is nothing but congestion. It's congestion constantly when the buses come out on at their times when they go to and from the schools, which are located in the areas, and they have to use that road. The traffic goes all the way back past like where Powell Road is, like it's lined up for long periods of time, and on Mount Pleasant as well. And the people race around that corner. So there's no traffic calming. There's nothing. They get around the corner and they just hammer their accelerator, and the noise is just increasing, and it's crazy. Also, I'm thinking another 240 cars coming across that. And when I look at the adjacent property, if they're going to do low density here, they're probably going to do low density on the next property. And that's like another 500 cars. Like, that's ridiculous. This area is not zoned for this. We have single family dwellings there. People enjoy the peace and as much peace and quiet as we can. But now that they've done all this development, it's not the same property at all. And I understand that it's going to change, but the change that we are experiencing is not acceptable. I am concerned about the trees. I've heard about the trees. It is well treed, that lot. The people who own that property, they put a lot of trees in, and I think this should be, they should be maintained. There's no way they're going to get the number of trees they're talking about. I don't think that's reasonable. The trail. So the trail is wonderful, but you're looking at probably at least another 400 people using that. The crossing across Conklin Road could be potentially very dangerous with another 400 people using that. So I'm concerned about that. There used to be a train tunnel underneath the trail. It's not there, and not like the train went over top, and then the cows and the horses and things would go underneath. So there's some significance to that, and we're just going to put houses all over that. There's a lovely home on that property. We're just going to demolish it, and just so that we can build and a developer can make a ton of money on this property. I don't think that we're thinking properly in this day and age. I know we're talking about making more housing acceptable, and there's lots of housing happening in Brantford that can cover that. We have a ton of condos going up in the old Canadian Tire Plaza. Why don't we keep this area more attuned to what has been built there and what people have been appreciating and living there? I'm not sure about the groundwater, but the current changes in the area are causing the back area of my property to become a swamp. So it is changing the ground level, the changes that are happening. And when I call City Hall, nobody will call me back. No one will give me any attention. I called about the traffic. They stuck the traffic signals in. I called, they didn't repair the grass. They didn't fix the corner. And it's just a mess. They allowed Union Gas to come in and put their big pipe in. It's just a mess. So I really don't feel comfortable that the city is going to manage this and look after that and make sure the existing residents are being looked after properly and that our properties are being valued. I'll turn it over to my husband if you'd like to say something.
Yes, I'd like to address the traffic issue and the fact that the person that was up here before us said that the traffic would be a negative impact. That's absolutely insane that you can't say that when there's already an impact. The bottleneck starts where Conklin was widened prior to the just north of the railroad tracks. And then at the railroad tracks, it comes in and it bottlenecks right there. And you can't get in and out. You cannot even get around the corner. And in the morning, when the buses are there, the traffic is backed so far up that people are waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And if we open this up and allow all these other people, they won't even be able to get out of the driveway the way it's set up, because the traffic is going to be right across their driveway and they're going to be sitting in there. So you're going to have all those cars, 89 or 233 cars trying to get out in the morning to go to work. And they're not going to be able to get out of there because that traffic can't get out of that from that corner. It doesn't work. And they're saying this is a negative impact. It's not. This is highly impacted. And if you take a look at it, you'll see where I'm talking about just north that the Conklin Road is wider and then it bottlenecks right back down, and they can't do anything because there's properties. The only way you're going to be able to widen Conklin to make this work is you have to move west onto that property and widen the road on that side. You're not going to be able to move over around the established homes that are already on the east side. So how are you going to make this road wider if you're going to put houses right along the road there? You're not going to be able to do it. It has to be amended. And so I think this should all be deferred. I think you need to think about this. We need to have another look at the traffic impact study. And at that point in time, then we can take a look at what can be done there. The other thing is they're talking about a sewer trunk line and water. Well, the water's already through there, but the sewers aren't. The sewers stop. And so after that, development in the area has been hampered because there's no sewage control brought out into that area. So all the subdivision that was put in already allowed on the south side of Mount Pleasant, they're extremely large properties so that they can establish, they had to have sewers but they have water. But the number one thing is that they have sewers. So you talk about expanse. They broke that whole area, that big farmland, and they put it only minimal number of houses on it because they had no system of sewage removal. I know that there's a plan putting in that they want to develop right from corner of Conklin all the way back down the hill and encompass the what is it called?
The Long Farm?
Not the Long Farm. I know the Long Farm's been bought, and all in behind where the graveyard is. What's it called? Farrington, right? So that's all going to be changed, and you're going to have more and more traffic. And I don't know how it's going to manage it if you don't widen Conklin at this time. And you can't widen Conklin if you allow this to happen. And the trees, I don't know how they're going to stick 10 trees in for every one that they take out. They're just saying that they're going to manage this as it comes along. There's a lot of things on their plan that they're going to change once this amendment, application is put through. They're going to put this through, and then you're not going to have access to them to make them do what they have to do. They're going to do, just like she said, what they can do. That's the way it's going to be. We're going to do what we can do. And then it was rephrased that this is what we are going to do, but that's not the way it is. We're going to have to cede that property, and then
30 seconds left.
30 seconds.
10 minutes.
Okay. Well, it's not going to work. And there needs to be a little bit more. And I know everything's working properly for them. And the development people are saying, yes, it is. It's just doesn't work in real life. It might work on paper, but it doesn't work in real life.
All right. We want to thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Gwynn, for taking the time to come in personally today to the council chambers to provide us with your input on this application. We will be dealing with this very shortly. And again, we make a recommendation to council, which then hears this again at the end of the month. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask if there is anyone else in the chamber who would like to speak to this matter, either in opposition to or in support of. If you'd please come forward. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone that's registered virtually? All right. So I'll ask a second time. Is there anyone present in the council chamber that would like to speak to this matter, either in opposition to or in support of the application? Please come forward. I will ask for a third time if there is anyone in the public chamber that would like to speak to this matter, either in support of or in opposition to. Now is your opportunity to come forward. Not seeing anyone, so we have no one registered virtually to speak to this. I should indicate for the record that We did previously receive 2 letters in opposition, one from a Patrick Lowen and another from an Eric Hovius. So with that, I'll ask the applicant if there is, you now have a 5-minute opportunity to provide any clarification to anything that came up during the staff presentation or from what we've heard from members of the public. It's not mandatory, just if you wish to. Okay. So I see that Ms. Morris, you're indicating that you do not wish to. That's fine. That's your right. So with that, that concludes the public hearing, public meeting portion or public hearing portion of this meeting. So we'll now move on to deal with the resolution itself. And Mr. Clerk, if you would please share for the members of the public who are watching virtually what the resolution is, which is essentially to approve the application. If I can have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor McCreary. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sless. So floor is open for discussion. Councillor Van Tilburg.
I'm going to say this. What was laid out by the citizens that came in this morning is a reflection of what's going to happen throughout our city. And that's a hard, cold fact to accept. But that's what's happening. And it's going to continue to happen. And these kinds of developments are going to continue to be approved and grow. I was the one that was very much behind the Canadian Tire development. And I'm glad that you came in and appreciated that. We did that infill. But this is where your area and what you're facing. And so I was very appreciative of hearing the trees and also skeptical, but you know what? There's always where there's a will, there's a way, and an increase is much better. But I want to say this, when citizens of the public decide, take their time to come in on an early Thursday morning, and the proponent hears what they have to say and doesn't seem to have the time to address it, you change my vote.
Councillor Sikoli, then Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, thank you. I know how much Liv puts value into working with the community and maintaining a good relationship with the community. And I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes when you develop abutting a trail system, and especially within our community. And I know traffic is a huge issue. I don't live far from you. Okay. So I do that. I drive my daughter to Assumption every single day. So I see it with my own eyes. There's definitely some improvements coming to that area. We know there is, because we're going to be doing a lot of developing out there. I'm going to be supporting this today, and I want to explain why. First and foremost, because we do have an opportunity at the site plan portion of this to really dive into the nuances of protecting the trail, which is incredibly important to me. And the second part of that is Bill 23. Bill 23, even if we shot this down today, the province will override it and it will still continue. And the only difference will be that we lose our say. Okay, so by working with the developer and having this good relationship with them and being able to have open dialogue, we actually do more for the community there than just letting it come down from the province of Ontario and then they get to make the decisions and it's all out of our hands. So that's why I'm supporting this today. And I know it seems backwards, but I'm actually doing it because I'm trying to help. Okay, and it will allow me to have those dialogues with the developer and move this forward. So I'm going to be supporting it, but I don't want you or anyone who submitted letters to think that it's fallen on deaf ears. I do it because I'm trying to help you. Okay, so I will be supporting this today, but I think we have a little bit more work to do with the developer on this particular project. Thank you.
Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could ask a question through you to, I guess, engineering development to Mr. Peaver. As far as plans to, we had identified by the resident a bottleneck where a narrowing happens on Conklin Road. Do we have a remedy for that? And if we do, when will it be implemented?
Through the chair to you, Councillor. There is a remedy through that. This part of Conklin Road was the former County of Brant Road network. We are looking to essentially match what is continued along through the city part of Conklin Road. Unfortunately, I can't give details of when and how that part will happen. Again, being with Public Works and their project, we would have to sit down with their team to understand what their abilities and what's going to happen through that project.
Okay, but it's not falling on deaf ears. We do understand there's a problem and we will be dealing with that problem. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just along the lines of what Councillor Sokoli was saying, any of these developments that are turned down by the city will pretty much automatically be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I think we have a good understanding of what happens when things land there. You could very well end up with a high-rise building there. What's submitted here can be changed when it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal with an appeal. And I guess it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because you can end up with something much, much worse than what we're staring at today. So it's an unfortunate situation, and it's something that is controlled, that really has no say in that. So I guess for those reasons, I as well will be supporting this, and we'll look to the ward councillors to guide the process as best they can to get the best deal they can for the residents that they represent. So I'll be supporting it, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carpenter.
I thought you forgot me. Just to Mr. Peaver, is this development paying any of the costs for the widening, the necessary widening of Conklin Road, which is required to make this development work?
Through the chair to Councillor, this development will be giving approximately 5 meters of land when it comes forward through the site plan to allow for widening of that part of the road, as well as the DC charges. Many of these projects in this area are from DC funds, and if this project goes forward, they would be contributing to that DC fund.
I thought the Conservative government eliminated DC charges. Do we still get DC charges for this?
Through the chair, that is correct. We still would receive DC funds.
So there will be funding for the widening of this road as well then from the DC charges.
Through the chair, I would have to defer to engineering services, but a part of this project definitely would coming from the DC charges.
Can we get a response from engineering services what the plan is for widening it before this comes to council for approval?
Through the chair, we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. Through you to staff. Looking at page 12 of the report indicates that back-to-back row house townhouse is not a defined use within the zoning bylaw. And then it adds in a definition, which apparently is provided by the proponent. I wonder if you could speak to that. This isn't a Brantford style development. It's a Mississauga, Brampton, Burlington style development. So if we don't have a definition for this, are there other definitions that we should be incorporating as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just ask maybe to confirm. So you were looking for a bit more of an explanation on the definition that was provided for back-to-back townhouse?
No, I think it's pretty clear that we don't have one, and that the applicant is providing us with one. Do I understand that correctly, Sean?
That's correct. And this definition has been taken from, similar definitions that have been in the County of Brant zoning bylaw for site-specific development similar to this.
Okay, but you can recall it. Well, it was before your time when my late friend turned a hallway into a sidewalk because we lacked the definition. So I'm just wondering if we're inserting this definition specific to this project, or if it becomes a definition then that will guide other projects as well.
This definition is specific to this site.
Okay, so is that what we'll be doing then? Is when you get these new to Brantford types of development that we're going to attach the definition specific to the project?
Through the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, we will be defining these new styles of dwelling units, and we'll use those definitions.
So are you going to pluck those out of the things that you see in other municipalities?
I'll defer to Nicole.
Through the chair to the counselor. It's an excellent point, and it really is reflective of the fact that we're dealing with a zoning bylaw from 1990 that really doesn't reflect any modernized or contemporary styles of development. So moving forward, like, we are intending to bring our new zoning bylaw to this council by the end of this year, and releasing actually a draft to the public for review in September, which is a great milestone in order to bring that forward. So in the interim, we're really just addressing these matters on a site-specific basis, but moving forward, we will be presenting a revised and renewed definitions list in our new zoning bylaw. But then, just speaking to that and not wanting to go too far down the rabbit hole of that project, I do think it's important that we also build in some flexibility in our zoning bylaw, which is a key aspect of streamlining. So that way we're not before this council for minor tweaks and definitions when the product and density is essentially the same.
Very wise. Very wise. Thank you. I'm going to echo the sentiment that we've heard in the room, and I respect the comments that we had in writing and from the delegations. But to some extent, we're not the masters of our own household here in the city of Brantford or in any other community in Ontario. We are driven by the provincial government's desire to increase housing. Some might say at all costs. I won't say that, but and we are subject to higher authority, and I don't mean I mean the provincial bodies that review rejections of applications like this. So I'm going to support this today as well, somewhat reluctantly. I think we can rely on Councillor Sicoli and her ward mate to ensure, as Councillor Celeste said, that they get the best deal for the neighbors, which is something that we all do when it's our turn to bear development like this. As far as developments go, it's pretty good. I think this is pretty responsible company. They seem to be addressing some of the environmental concerns. And to their credit, they haven't tried to squeeze 20 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag, and they've actually reduced the number of units. And although we could do better on parking, it's acceptable to us and to the province to consider the garages, which in most cases become storage lots, as part of the 2-car requirement. It would be good if perhaps you can squeeze a few more parking spaces out of this, and maybe that will evolve over time. But as I said, it's pretty good development, and we annexed county lands.
Councillor Curry, do you want me to put down for a second speaking?
I'll just have like 30 more seconds, Mayor.
Make it 15, go.
So we annexed county lands, and they're not really becoming part of Brantford. It looks more like they're becoming part of Mississauga or Brampton with respect to the developments that we're seeing. Thanks for that, Mayor.
Yeah, I want to express, as someone who's almost been here for 7 decades, I appreciate the concern that Mr. and Mrs. Seguin have mentioned to us. I mean, I grew up in a single family subdivision. Once I became an adult, most of my life was lived in a single family subdivision. I think most of us, my generation who grew up, expected that's the way it was, and that's the way it would continue to be. And those would be through years and decades where Ontario had very little growth and sometimes had net out migration to areas like Alberta. But that's not how the world that's not the current world. Ontario, and particularly Southern Ontario, is one of the fastest growing areas in North America. We have a lot of migration into Southern Ontario, and a lot of it is being driven by the federal government's decision to raise immigration levels, which everyone agrees with. But that is taking immigration levels to 500,000 people per year. And that's about 400,000 people a year that are coming to Ontario. And so how does that, what does that mean to say a community like Brantford? Well, we have to take our share of that. And that's why the province has imposed growth targets on us. And, historically, our city would add anywhere between 500 to 1,000 residents per year would be added to our population. In the new world that we're part of, that's about 3,000 people per year. That's, that is 4 to 5 times what we normally would have grown by. And so that means that, and at the same time, you can't just simply do cookie cutter subdivisions. Otherwise, there won't be any farmland left in Southern Ontario. And so the provincial government is forcing us, and the reality of the world is forcing us to look at development that's denser, i.e. more people per square acre. And for example, if you built the same number of units, 89, if you built that as the smallest possible single family lot, you need to double the amount of land required to construct 89 units. And so that's the reality that we face, both that by virtue of living in Southern Ontario, policies of the federal government, and that impact the provincial government, and as they attempt to deal with that and the impact on housing through growth policies that are mandated. We don't have any choice. But I appreciate that it's jarring when you see developments like that in the Canadian Tire lot. It's different than what we're used to, and it's disconcerting. But if you choose to live in Southern Ontario, that's the way life's going to be, because of the decisions made by the upper levels of government and just generally what's happening in the world. So that means that I will support this. I do agree there are some very serious concerns. I'm concerned about the impact on the trail as well. And certainly the site plan control process will be very critical to minimizing the impact. And so far as the number of trees, 10 per one, I mean, that's great. I mean, yes, and those trees won't be all on this lot. They'll be somewhere else, but that does mean more trees. So I'm going to support this. And Councillor Van Tilburg, did you want to speak a second time?
I do, and I just want to clarify. The proponent probably would have had a clean sweep today. And I know you'll be back for others in the future. And I just want to make it really clear, because I know that some of the queries and questions that the citizens that came in today to ask for, you could have addressed a few of them, you could have answered them, you could have, at least if they've not put their minds at rest, you could have at least given an answer. And they've come out here, you have that opportunity to respond. That's why it's given to you. And I was somewhat, well, you'll know, I'm voting against something that I was going to support. Just, I wish to send a message. When citizens come in and they have concerns, and you know that that's within your realm to address, do your best to do so, please.
Councillor Carpenter, second time.
I just want to point out one thing. I know we're blaming the province and blaming the federal government. The decisions are ours here, and we're supposed to be making decisions here, not as members of council, but members of a planning committee and following the rules and regulations of the Planning Act. And that's how we're supposed to be adjudicating our decisions here today. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Scully, second time.
I just want to inquire, is it appropriate for a committee member to be speaking directly to someone in the audience? I find that a little bit inappropriate.
I guess you're raising that as a point of order. I mean, that is proper protocol that you do put questions at a public hearing and meetings of this council and committee through the chair. We at times are we relax that, especially we have members of the public that we're talking to, but a good reminder. Thank you, Councillor Scully. So with that, I'll call the question. Yes, do you want to speak for a second time, Councillor McCurry?
Mayor, thank you. My arm was getting quite sore.
Well, I'd already let you go much longer on the basis you weren't going to speak a second time.
No, I didn't. I did not append my remarks by saying thank you. I will not speak a second time. But Councillor Carpenter's point is quite well taken. We are a planning committee. We're not a standing committee of council as such, where we have different rules. Although regardless of who's in the chair, we do wander a bit and we talk about things that are not germane to the item before us, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. And, you know, we tend to be somewhat informal, even though this is a formal proceeding. But we are, as Councillor said, addressing planning issues, planning matters, and the latitude given by chair to wander allows us to do the kind of interaction.
I'm going to cut you off pretty quick. You're wandering very. And I'd say this, I mean, we are a standing committee of council. And so we're not some kind of separate creature, but we do have to follow procedures that are in the Planning Act when we sit as a planning committee. So that I'm going to call the vote.
Item 4.1 carries on a recorded vote of 5-1. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Van Tilburg.
I would say, though, we did have some interesting discussion there. So let's move on to the second item. The public hearing portion. It's item 4.2, which is an application for zoning bylaw amendment PZ 0523. It's in relation to 26 Freeborn Avenue. And I'd now ask the applicant to come forward to appear before the committee. Yes, I see that's Mr. Phillips is coming in virtually from J.H. Kahuna.
It's Bob Phillips from J.H. Kahuna Engineering, representing Angelo Capucci on the application at 2026 Freeborn Avenue. This is an application to amend the zoning bylaw to allow 3 additional units to be created within the building, an existing building on the site. We've read the planning staff report and are fully supportive of it. This proposal utilizes some unutilized space within the building where 3 more units can be created. There are some deficiencies on the site that existed prior to this application. So in fact, they probably have some legal non-conforming status, but through this application, as you can see in the planning staff report, they now are reflecting some of those deficiencies so that they will be within the zoning bylaw now. As I said, we're supportive of the application. It's an opportunity to easily create additional units, and we're seeking support of the committee. And if there's any questions you may ask, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Mr. Phillips? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. That was fairly short, but it's a fairly straightforward application. So members, we'll now move to hearing from planning staff. If someone wants to hear from planning staff, if someone does, just raise your hand. Well, it would appear that that will not be necessary. It's a fairly straightforward application. So we'll now move directly into seeking public input. Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone registered virtually to speak to this? No, we don't. So I'll ask then, is there anyone who is present in the chamber that would like to speak to this matter, either in support of or in opposition? Please come forward. If there is anyone in the chamber who would like to speak to the matter before us, either to speak in support of the application or in opposition to, if you would please come forward. And I'll ask for a third and final time, if there's any member of the public who is present today that would like to speak to this planning application, either in opposition to it or in support, now is your last opportunity to come forward. So we have no members of the public, but I also understand that there were no members of the public that came to the prior public neighborhood meeting. So I will ask Mr. Phillips, you have an opportunity to speak up to 5 minutes if there's anything you want to clarify.
I don't think there's anything to clarify, but I wouldn't want to be said I didn't respond.
So you're actually coming forward then, and you're making yourself available if anyone on the committee has any questions for you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Phillips? Not seeing anything. So yes, you have formally come forward. Thank you. So we'll now move into, the public meeting is now closed. So we'll now move in to deal with the matter. Mr. Clerk, if you could please share for us. All right, if I can have a mover and seconder get the floor. Moved by Councillor McCurry, second by Councillor Carpenter. Any discussion? Councillor Carpenter.
Just quickly, it's in Ward 4. The current owners have owned it for a long, long time. And there has been no maintenance problems for me with the issues. And if there is a problem, a quick call to the owner and it's resolved very satisfactorily. So what we're doing is taking an existing building and adding 3 units to unused space, which is more housing stock. This is a win-win and a good story for the city. Thank you.
Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. So building code regulations will be part of this development. It's basement units, so I would imagine there's going to be some sort of change to the fenestration to allow bigger windows to access or egress rather in the event of fire.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Yeah, it'll all go through the building code, so they'll have to comply to all OBC regulations, fire code, things like that. So the next stage after this kind of goes through will be to apply for that building permit and make sure they're checking all those boxes.
And it's 3 units because they still will be maintaining like a laundry and storage in the other quarter of the building.
Through the chair, I presume so. They haven't seen like the full floor plans, but I presume that there's a restriction in space. So it is like a very narrow building itself. So I don't know that they could fit more than 3 units down there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I wanted to commend the applicant as well. It's an excellent application in the sense of increase the number of units in a building that's already in place. And that's exactly what we're hoping for, given the housing crisis we're facing. So I'll move then to calling Councillor Sluss. Go ahead.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, just a comment, and I guess just to reconfirm what Councillor Carpenter said, we get a lot of builds to create more housing, but it's always for sale. These are rentals, and I think we have an acute shortage of rental properties in the city. Well, this isn't a large number. It certainly chips away at the deficit that we have. So I'm very pleased.
All right, I'll call the vote.
Item 4.2 carries unanimously on recorded votes. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sluss, McCurry, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so that completes the public hearing portion of the meeting. And we'll now move into dealing with the other matters that were separated. But prior to doing that, we do have 2 delegations. So the first is Mr. Webb from Webb Planning Consultants. And understand you'd like to come forward, sir, to speak to 58 Morel Street. And you have up to 10 minutes to present, inclusive of questions. I understand it may be short, but
good morning, Your Worship, Chairman, members of committee, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is James Webb, professional land use planner, speaking to you today on behalf of the Rosart Bucci Group. My submissions to you today are, in fact, relatively brief. As committee is aware, this matter was before you approximately 3 months ago with direction to ourselves to advance on a couple of items, in particular, trying to expedite peer reviews of technical studies that were necessary to address matters of land use compatibility, and an encouragement for us to have further dialogue with the abutting property owners. I can confirm that the peer reviews are near to being finished. They do validate the planning opinion that I previously offered to this committee, in that I believe, based on those findings, that this proposed development, which implements a residential designation of the official plan, can achieve appropriate development. land use compatibility. That's an underlying objective, especially in a neighborhood such as this, where you've got, legacy industrial uses, pressures for intensification of non-employment uses, the lens onto the applications to make sure that the final Planning Act approvals are in fact appropriate. I'm not here today to push this committee for a decision on the applications. There have been ongoing dialogues between my client and the neighboring industrial users. I've had further conversations with Councillor Sless leading up to today's meeting, and I have before you today to indicate that on behalf of my clients, I think it's prudent that we continue to work collaboratively. I think the city is now wanting to take a more direct role in those conversations towards a resolution that ultimately maintains that adjoining industrial precinct for its longstanding uses, their commitment to the city. It's certainly a position that we don't relish, wherein we're coming in and there's a perception that we are in any way prejudicing their long-term use of that property and commitment. So if I may, perhaps if it's appropriate, I would defer to Councillor Sless. I believe that there's been a motion that's been contemplated as to how we can further that dialogue. I mean, appreciate my client, he is anxious to proceed. So if it is at all possible for us to work diligently and have this matter returned to the August Planning Committee meeting, we'd be grateful for that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, those are my submissions. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that may arise from that submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. Appreciate you very much for the very collaborative comments that you have made this morning. So any questions? We'll go to Councillor Carpenter first.
Thank you for coming. You are aware, though, even if this application gets turned down, you can apply to LPAT and likely get it approved, as was spoken about earlier.
Through the chair, we're certainly aware of that. My client has, good qualified legal counsel. We've looked at all of our alternatives. Again, if we're just talking about a further couple of months delay, we're comfortable with that.
And how long ago was the property purchased by Mr. Rosehart?
Oh, you've got me on that one. At least in excess of 2 years ago, and they have been expending monies. They are partway through a remediation on the property. There was a demolition of the building, and they are proceeding towards the development. So they have been investing in the property towards its ultimate redevelopment. But I think all parties agree to stand down and see if we can't come to a resolution.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say thank you and generous extending, I guess, the goodwill of the city, of their abutting neighbor, and of themselves to work collaboratively to come up with a solution that everybody can walk away with and be happy. So I'm appreciative of the time that we've been allowed, and I can assure all those involved that we will work as expediently as we can to come to a resolve and find a solution to this situation. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Webb.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Webb, and we will be dealing with this very shortly, and dealing with it, I suspect, rather summarily. Probably, I understand Councillor Sless may put on the floor a motion to defer until the August cycle, which would be about 60 days.
Okay. Thank you very much for my submission. I'll remain in the audience. Should anything arise, I'm pleased to return and address any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. So I believe we have, yes, we do. We have a second delegation. I believe we have some representatives from SC Johnson, one of whom is coming forward.
Excuse me?
Your microphone's now on.
Oh, thank you. Well, good morning, Chairman, councilors, members of the Planning Committee. My name is Richard Camacho. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Global Supply Chain at SC Johnson. I'm here on behalf of the company, speaking with regard to the manufacturing facility that we have next door to this site at 1 Webster Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again today. Since we were last before you, our company's position is unchanged. SC Johnson remains fundamentally opposed to the rezoning request, and our appearance here today and our ongoing engagement with city leaders reflects just how seriously we continue to take this matter. We continue to have grave concerns about the negative impact that residential encroachment will have on our ability to operate our manufacturing facility on an ongoing basis. In fact, the company has already had to reconsider significant local investments in Brantford because of the operational uncertainty caused by the potential residential development. SC Johnson very much appreciated the Planning Committee's unanimous recommendations to defer a decision on this bylaw amendment application when the committee met in early March, which the full City Council subsequently approved. We continue to have ongoing discussions with the owner of the property at 58 Morel Street, Mr. Ray Bucci, and we are optimistic that we can obtain a resolution directly with him. However, more time is needed to reach a mutually agreeable arrangement, and accordingly, we respectfully request the Planning Committee to recommend an additional deferral of a decision on the zoning bylaw amendment application. Granting an additional short-term deferral will give the parties time needed to reach an amicable resolution here at the local level. Further, we believe that it's in the interest of all parties involved, including that of the city, to resolve this matter at the municipal level and not let it escalate to the level of the provincial government. So in closing, SC Johnson is not anti-development, nor are we anti-housing. We understand and fully appreciate the city of Brantford's responsibility to meet the province's growing housing needs. At the same time, we wish to continue being a good neighbor that SC Johnson has been for more than 100 years here in Brantford, providing steady employment, making high-quality products for families across Canada, and giving back to the community that has been SC Johnson Canada's home since 1920. What we seek here is a solution that will allow our operations to continue to function unimpeded by residential encroachment so that we can continue contributing to the Brantford community and economy. And we appreciate the committee's consideration of our request for an additional deferral. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to respond to any questions of the committee members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camacho. And I know you had some members of your delegation actually had to travel here from different parts of the U.S.
Yes.
So any members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, so you're looking for an amicable solution. Is part of that amicable solution is SC Johnson taking up part of the property or buying some of the property and putting some kind of a screening in there from residential so that you could, your concerns could be alleviated?
Yes, we're looking at any and all solutions that would, again, result in an amicable solution between both parties. Our plan, if we were to acquire the site itself, would be to use that as a buffer with the plant, leave it as green space. We would not intend to build anything on it.
And it could be planting extra trees on it to even reduce
Certainly.
noise reduction. Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Scully.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked last time SC Johnson was before us. This property was for sale on the free market. If you were so passionate about retaining this piece as a buffer, why not come forward and purchase it and avoid all of this?
Sure, through the chairman to the councillor, I think somehow we missed the opportunity to do that. We were not aware that the property was at site. I don't exactly know how that happened, but we missed understanding and hearing about it and missed that opportunity. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Camacho, and we will be dealing with this matter shortly.
Thank you.
So members, we have two items that were separated for discussion purposes, this and the safe housing supply. So if I can get a mover and a seconder to place those two items on the floor for discussion purposes. Moved by Councillor McCreary, seconded by you. All right, so we'll deal with the first item because of course there was a delegation. It's also first in the numbering. And that is 6.61 zoning bylaw amendment, PZ 1822, draft plan of condominium, re-58 Morel Street, which was before us earlier this spring for the public hearing. And I believe, well, we obviously know there is going to be a motion to defer. So Councillor Sluss, I think you've got that. Do you want to put that on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd be pleased to. It's moved by myself, seeking a seconder, that item 6.1.
That's Councillor Van Tilburg has agreed to second it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg, that item 6.1.1 Planning Committee agenda dated June 15, 2023 for rezoning bylaw amendment PZ-18-22 and draft plan of condominium be deferred for one meeting cycle to August 17th, 2023 of the Planning Committee meeting so that city can facilitate ongoing discussions between the applicant and SC Johnson to find potential options to proceed with development and an amicable solution between the applicant and SC Johnson.
All right.
I don't believe I'm allowed to speak to a deferral. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct. It's not a referral. It is a deferral.
It's a deferral.
Other than time and place. So no, time and place only. So any issue, time and place? Not seeing any. Call vote.
The deferral of item 611 carries on a recorded vote of 5-1. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sluss, McCreary, Van Tilburg, Sokoli, Mayor Davis. Members opposed, Councillor Carpenter.
All right, members, we've been going almost 2 hours, and I think I'd like to take a short break, and we can come back, take the one remaining item, and then we'll have completed our business for the day. Hopefully we'll be finished by noon hour. All right, we'll reconvene. And we do have one item for consideration, and that is 6.1.2, safe housing supply through additional dwelling units. And this is a planning staff report arising out of a resolution that council passed last October. Tara, I believe you're the staff person because I asked for it to be separate. And I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, Tara, thanks for the report. And so this is generated by it. The genesis of this is Bills 108 and Bill 23 of the province, which allows for greater density in single family residential zones as of right. And this is the 3 units. And I believe the resolution was last October, and it was a request to staff to what is it we need to do here at the city to ensure that, well, given what the province has done, are there other processes or procedures we should put in place to protect the residential integrity of neighborhoods and character of neighborhoods? And I know it was also a request to look at what other municipalities are doing. But first of all, what exactly does Bill 23 allow? Does it mean in a single family lot you can put up 3 separate units, housing units?
Through the chair to the mayor, Tara Tran, senior planner in the planning department. I'll just refer to page 4 of the staff report that does provide what Bill 23 outlines as the scenarios for the additional dwelling units. So what they
plain language.
Right. The idea being that if a residential lot has an existing house, single detached house, that house may construct within it 2 additional units, residential units within that existing house. Or if there is a detached unit, such as a detached garage or a shed that can be converted to a residential unit, at least one of those additional units can be in the detached structure. So then again, the single detached primary house could have 2 units and then 1 in a detached shed or garage to add up to 3. The idea being that at the end of the day, there's a maximum of 3 residential units on that single lot.
So if someone wanted to do that, if they had a large house and a single family lot and they wanted to create 2 additional units within the same building, they just go ahead and do it, or do they have to apply for a permit, or what do they normally have to do?
So under Bill 23, it says they don't have to ask for zoning permissions. Now they can do it as of right. What they do need to do is apply for a building permit to make sure those units are constructed according to the building code.
All right. And when someone applies for a building permit, is the parking looked at?
The parking is looked at when they apply for a building permit.
And what do you look for?
The requirement is that each unit must have its own 1 parking spot per unit.
And is there anything else that's besides building code issues or fire code, anything else that's considered?
The building permit process will consider and make sure that the zoning is appropriate and that they meet all the zoning parameters, and make sure that it's built to the building code, which also includes consideration of the fire code.
So looking to other municipalities, is there anything in particular or specific that other municipalities have done beyond what we do?
According to the comparator municipalities that I looked at, and I wanted to look at those that were similar population size, as well as perhaps had a post-secondary institution in their community. Other municipalities may consider or implement a registration program or a licensing program. They are 2 different types of programs.
So a registration program is the landlord just gets registered. Licensing is a lot more involved. It means inspecting and there being standards, that sort of thing.
I'll defer to Jill Binkley to just make that clarification.
Through the chair, yes, that's exactly correct.
Right, and some of the comparator municipalities, Guelph, et cetera, they have registration programs. We don't have a program here, although we're trying to create a website that'll have a list of available landlords.
Through the chair, that is correct. We do have certain accommodation types that we license here or register. So we have hotels, motels, lodging houses, short-term rental units. But beyond that, the city was working on sort of a rent safe website that kind of gives a list of the options available to sort of help people find safe resources.
My last question is, are any other municipalities doing a licensing system? And if so, what does that entail?
Through the chair, yes. The most recent are City of Hamilton and City of Windsor. They've started a 2-year licensing pilot project for rental units of 4 units or less. They are, with the pilot program, they are choosing sort of a specific area. So the Human Rights Code does not allow you to just kind of pick a certain area forever. So you can do a pilot project with a certain area, see how it goes in your municipality. And then at the end of that program, you can decide whether you want to roll it out citywide or not pursue it any further. So as you mentioned earlier, it does include inspections. Usually building, health, and fire are kind of our key inspection partners, as well as these other municipalities that are running the licensing programs.
Yeah, I went beyond my 4 minutes, so we'll go to Councilor Carpenter next.
Yes, you went over 6 minutes actually, but. Okay.
No, with the question that was 4 minutes, 10 seconds. The answer took it beyond 4.
Thanks. It still counts. To staff, the 3 units that you talk about, one of those units, if I understand, you can make the house a duplex, and if there's a garage that's separate building, that can also be changed into a residential unit. Does that qualify for the 3?
In that scenario, if the house had the primary structure, the house has 2 units, and the garage becomes a unit, a residential unit, that is the maximum 3.
So that would still qualify for 3.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Sikoli?
Yes, thank you. The additional dwelling units are a great tool. We're gonna, add some affordable housing units, and it also helps dilute the cost of home ownership as we experience those inflationary rates. But I can't help but wonder with the parking. So we're going through and where it seems to be something that's always coming up as we're approving site plans and zoning amendments and things like that. Is there anything that we can do to protect ourselves moving forward, knowing that every house has the ability to add 3 units, but we're approving these sites based on the single dwelling that will be there at its inception? So what can we do as a municipality to prevent these situations down the road where, for example, perhaps looking at the width of the streets so that we can ensure that there's parking available? Or we've seen this where the frontages of these properties are too narrow where a car could barely park there. So what can we do to protect ourselves as we start, Ward 1 obviously has a lot going on there, and then we're going to have it north of Power Line as well. So what do we do? What do we have in our brain? What do you recommend to us?
Through the chair to Councillor. So the zoning regulations are where those controls are put in place. I should point out that Bill 23 does restrict the municipality from having any more restrictive parking than. So we can't ask for 2 parking spaces per unit. We are not allowed under the provincial regulations. We have to ask the maximum we can ask for is 1 parking.
I understand that. That's why I'm saying, what can we do?
So then in addition to that, I'm hearing, sometimes lot frontages are, where one would have street parking, may not be wide enough for a car. So certainly those are components to consider in the new zoning bylaw regulation that addresses, that balance. We are also aware and considering that car ownership, especially if these units are close to public transit or other options to walk or bike, that the car ownership may not be for every single unit required, perhaps especially if it's a student. So we certainly can use the zoning bylaw tool to address exactly what you're saying, in acknowledging that parking is an issue.
Yeah, this is why I'm advocating for neighborhood specific zoning, because my neighborhood, there are households with 7 or 8 cars, right? And then downtown, that might not be the case. So yeah, I'll leave that with you, and I look forward to discussing this further at the zoning bylaw committee.
Councilor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, folks. So with respect to lot coverage, we see a lot of these backyard structures being built. What's the maximum lot coverage that's in effect for our residential zones?
As an expert on our zoning bylaw in terms of the regulations, I will defer this to Rob Porteous from the building department.
Good handoff.
Good morning, Rob Porteous, Deputy CVO with the City of Brantford Building Department. Under the zoning bylaw, the lot coverage for a detached structure is 10%. Just to give you an idea, the ADU program, as we call it, has been actually in place in Brantford since 2012, although the provincial regulations that we're discussing just since this year. So we've had 312 building permits for ADUs since 2012. Only 23 of those were detached units. So it's not a very large number compared to the overall. Only 6 of them were additions. So we're talking about the majority of units are contained in the existing house. We're not seeing building permits. We see building permits, but we're not seeing a lot of building permits for detached units.
And in those cases, the lot coverage
is 10%.
Is 10%.
Yeah.
So that means only 10% of the lot can be occupied by structures?
Yeah, and that's actually that's the same rule for a detached garage.
Mm-hmm.
The bylaw just defaults to that section. So the rule's the same whether you're using it for an accessory dwelling unit or a detached garage or a workshop or something.
And with respect to regulations regarding landscaped area of a lot, do we have a regulation that requires landscaping?
So that's covered in 2 different ways in the bylaw. First is that front yards, you have to have a minimum of 50% landscaping in your front yard. And then there's lot coverages for the entire lot. So the 10% for the detached structure. And then there's also lot coverages for the principal dwelling. They range typically around 35% of the lot.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Rob.
Well,
and a second question that I have relating to what's happening in the city of Calgary, where neighborhoods are protecting the nature apparently of their neighborhoods by doing something in the way of restrictive covenants on title. Have staff had any exposure to that circumstance?
Through the chair to the councillor, we haven't necessarily explored restrictive covenants in this regard. But I think it's a good question and it's a good idea. And it's something that I think we can take away and look at. Circling back to some of the comments about what municipalities can do, the city of Brantford's in a really good position right now with the zoning bylaw project that is currently underway. I think as a general theme, what we're seeing from the province is things that were previously considered to be maximums quickly becoming the minimums, whether we're talking about parking standards or we're even talking about planning for growth. At one point, we were looking at long-term forecasts being our maximum number to plan for. Now they are quickly becoming the minimum number to plan for. That takes us to take a step back and look for creative solutions where we can try to alleviate some of the concerns. For example, some municipalities you may see are even implementing things like what's referred to as apron parking. It's a way to get the cars off the street and into the driveways in that at the bottom portion, like the boulevard. I call it the boulevard, they call it the apron. But these are all tools that we're starting to see. I'm not sure how effective they will be, but these are things that we are committed to looking at through that zoning bylaw project, because we do need to start to consider that what we're seeing on the ground is the minimum, and that we will fully expect that when we're looking at single family homes, we could have 3 units in those. So we have to be thinking ahead that this could be the maximum and this could be the reality of the situation on the ground.
So can I ask staff then to explore the, do a bit of research on the covenants that we're seeing in Calgary and provide us with I don't know if it's an appendix to this or a memo to explain that to us?
Yes, absolutely. I think we can, the request for this research to be done came through the Building and Construction Task Force. So if it's agreeable to the clerk, I would suggest that we could bring something back to that task force in addition to the report that is before you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you confirm for me, through staff, Mr. Mayor, that the each unit is created within existing structure has to have its own dedicated entrance?
Through the chair, yes, that's in the zoning bylaw, that a ADU is required to have a separate exterior entrance.
Councillor Sluss, you have to unmute.
I'm sorry, I lost my connection. What I was saying was, I think most homes are designed in a way that would probably not be sympathetic to allow that to happen. Would I be correct in my assumption?
Through the chair, what we're seeing is a lot of basement entrances built through building permits. Sometimes it's internal and they have, an exterior door at grade level and then the stair inside separate, but there are options through the building code to make that happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you. A number of these are probably being constructed without building permits. And I know, using other examples, when we discover something that's been constructed without a building permit, we go in and we demand conformity and that they come and get building permits. Is there not a way to put a deterrent in where you're fined if you're caught building things without the permit? Because anything I've had to do with these, when we discover something like this, we go in and we ask for conformity. Do we not have the ability to fine people for doing illegal things without permits?
Through the chair, yes, we do. We have a dedicated staff member, a building enforcement officer, who investigates complaints of construction without a permit of all types. There are policies and through the regulation, we can issue orders, but eventually, we come with a education and compliance first approach. But laying charges is definitely an option in that process.
Okay, because I don't recall ever being involved in one where we did do that, so I didn't think it was an option. And just one final one, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure driveway apron, and I'm not sure what all that means. I call it a driveway approach that kind of is the paved part from the street up to where your property starts at the sidewalk. Is it legal to park there, or would something have to be changed to make that legal to happen?
Through the chair to the councillor, we do not permit that parking right now. The comment that I was making was that we are seeing that as coming forward in some of our surrounding municipalities as a mechanism to deal with residences that have multiple vehicles and not necessarily having the ability to accommodate those vehicles on the street. So they're allowing for them to park on that, exactly what you're talking about, that portion that, goes from the road, the paved portion into their driveway.
Okay, so currently that's illegal.
That is correct. That is what I was saying, that staff would be looking at. This is one example of creative solutions that many municipalities are implementing to address the very concerns that Councillor Sicoli was bringing up. These are the things that staff are investigating as part of our new zoning bylaw project, as whether or not they would be effective and whether or not they would be appropriate in every situation, as some of our lots would not necessarily have the width to accommodate that apron type parking. But it's another creative solution to help address this concern of increased housing, increased units, increased density, and not necessarily having the roads or the infrastructure to support that.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I have a second round of discussion. And Jill, I have a question for you about the landlord licensing system. So normally I assume that's normally done not to deal with density issues under Bill 23 or Bill 108, but really to deal with, shall we call it, quality of the tenancy issues?
Through the committee, that is again absolutely correct. So the licensing actually covers what we are seeing is all rental units. So it's not specific to ADUs, and it is coming from a place of public safety and consumer protection. So that's sort of the aim of the licensing programs in these other communities, and certainly the aim of a lot of our licensing programs in Brantford.
Right. All right. And so Tara, a question for you. The resolution before us essentially is that well, if you just confirm what the resolution, what it states, what it provides for.
Through you, it is simply asking this report to be received as information.
Okay, great. All right, so we have the resolution on the floor. It's already been nominated and seconded. At our discussion, I'm going to call the vote.
Item 6.1.2 carries unanimously on a recorded vote of 6-0. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Toborg, Sicoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so we have no resolutions. We have no notices of motion. So that completes this month's planning committee business.